guys, what's up? Thank you so much for tuning in today here at Elevate Church. We know that today's message is going to rock your world and elevate you to the next level in your life. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the message.
You know, the Bible tells us that faith comes by hearing, and hearing of the Word of God. And he says that he indwells in the praises of his people. And we just got finished giving him crazy praise. So I'm excited because that means that we are in the very presence of God. If you believe that, give a big amen. As you guys are going ahead to James chapter 2, I just want to remind you guys know that we are days away from opening our school in Oaxaca for Elevate Kids Global. So big things are going to happen, and we're all excited for that. So I just want to remind everyone here, continue to pray for our pastors and our team that went. If you were here Sunday, we prayed them on their journey out, and so cover them, safety and all of that. But also, remember, when we talk about the church, we're talking about each other, right? We're talking about you and I who come here on a weekly basis. And so as we continue to be the church, remember, keep it in your heart that just as much as the team and pastors are going out to pave the way for these children to get educated and to become leaders of their state, leaders of their country, we should have that same heart to believe God to do some great and mighty things there. Even though we're here in Newhall, California, there's no limits in the faith. There's no limits in what we can believe for. So just continue to do that as we see God do great and mighty things in Oaxaca, Mexico. So you guys there, James 2? James chapter 2. Here we go, starting on verse 14. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or a sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, "Go in peace, keep warm and well fed," but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. I want you to go ahead and highlight that. Some of you may already have that highlighted because it's something that you may have heard often in a church service, but go ahead and grab your pens or do something, mark that up, because we're going to talk about this today. Faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. Can I be a little honest this evening with myself, telling myself maybe? One of the biggest things I think that I struggle with that frustrates me is when I'm dealing with a particular issue and I'm going to someone for a solution, and I'm going to them because they have let me know that they can provide the solution if I'm having trouble. And I go to them for a solution, and I tell them what's going on, and I ask them, "Can you help me with this?" But instead of giving, and some of you may have experienced this, instead of giving you a solution, all they do is replay the obvious. All they do is restate to you what your issue is. And I'm sitting here now with my issue and now your understanding of my issue instead of a solution. And so it's just a frustration of mine that I'm working on being patient with and trying to work around it. But it's true, it's there. And just recently I had a situation with my cell phone carrier, and we just added a line to our family plan, and we wanted to go ahead and keep an old number for the phone that we are bringing on. So we wanted to get it transported over, and we went into the store, very helpful, took care of us, said, "You know what, as soon as you get home tonight, the number will be ported, you'll be good to go. You can use that number." So we get home, and it wasn't ready. The phone number that they had given us as a temporary was still active, and the number that we wanted transferred over was not. So called the customer service, talked to them a little bit, and said, "Hey, it's not working. We were told that when we get home tonight, we'll be ready to go." So they said, "You know what? It must be some kind of glitch, must be some kind of issue. Just give it about 48 hours. In 48 hours, you'll be ready to go. Your number will be transferred over. Bam, you can get going." So a couple days passed, 40 hours to be exact, and nothing happened. Okay, maybe they just kind of miscommunicated with each other and someone dropped the ball somewhere. Okay, I'll come give them a call back. Give them a call back. Here we are, 48 hours later. And I call in and I talk to someone and they said, you know what? I explained to them the issue. They said, you know what? I'm going to take care of you if you don't mind holding for a second. So I'm holding. Then the line starts ringing and someone from another department gets on and now I have to explain myself again to them. And so we're talking about it. I'm saying, hey, I'm having this issue. They told me the day we had it transferred that this night it would be ready. Here we are 48 hours later and it's still not ready. Can you help me with this? So they said, sure, no problem. Checking their system. They look in their system and what they say is that they're like, sir, well, it looks like the number that we have given you temporarily is active and the number that we ported over is not active. And I said, I know, that's what I was telling you. So they're stating the obvious, and I'm like, okay, we got to talk to someone to get this resolved. Is there anyone that can help me here? So they transfer me to their, I guess, superior and whatever. And so in their system, they said that it looks like actually both the numbers are active. And so it's going to take another 48 to 72 hours for it to become active. So now we're coming up almost on a week of a temporary number and causing all kinds of confusion, and as you can imagine. So here we are, almost a week later, and still nothing happening, nothing changing, getting kind of frustrating. People are deleting the contact because they're like, this person doesn't even exist anymore. And so now it's becoming an issue. So I call them again and say, look, I don't even want to talk to the front runner. I want to skip the front runner, get to the department we need to deal with and take care of this. So they said, okay, yeah, no problem. Let me transfer you over to them. They'll be able to help you. They get on the line. Sure enough, I'm explaining myself again. They seem to don't really understand what the issue was, so I got to tell them everything. And they proceed to tell me that the line that was given to you is active and the line that you wanted over was not active. I know that. We've gone through this for about a week. And so this whole thing went on for a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks of just, and they finally got down to it and we talked to them on the phone and took care of it. And so see, the issue with them wasn't necessarily that they didn't believe me. They believed me. In fact, that was why they were willing to give me to the person responsible of taking care of me. They believed that what I was telling them was true. Everything that I said, the issues I had, they believed it. The problem is they weren't taking the action necessary that supported that they did believe me. And so their faith was useless to me. Their faith in believing that I was right was useless because nothing was being done. There was no action taken. So in a sense, it was their faith in me was dead. Some of you may be here and you're facing an issue where it seems like all you're doing is replaying the obvious that's in front of you. The reality that your children really want nothing to do with Jesus. The reality that you just aren't quite making enough to make ends meet. The reality that you've been praying and believing for a breakthrough in your healing, and yet the aches and pains are still very real. And so your faith says that it's done because your faith believes that it's done. And your faith believes that Jesus is the healer. And your faith believes that Jesus does restore. And your faith believes that Jesus does save. But your actions prove that your faith is dead. So let's keep reading here. Verse 18 of James chapter 2. But someone will say, you have faith, but I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds. You believe that there is one God. Bravo. Good. Even the demons do that. Even the demons believe that there is one God. Even demons, and let's take it. Even demons have a faith in God. And they shudder. You foolish person, do you want evidence that faith without deeds is useless? Was not our father Abraham considered righteous for what he did when he offered his son Isaac on the altar? You see, that his faith and his actions were working together. Go ahead and mark that in your Bible. His faith and his actions were working together. And watch this. And his faith was made complete by what he did. His faith was made complete by what he did. Tonight, church, the message that I have for you is titled HD Faith, High Definition Faith. You may be thinking, did he really run out of cool sermon titles to call it HD Faith? Close, but no. The reason why I call it HD Faith is, you see, as children of God, as believers in God, we have been given a measure of faith. Faith belongs to us. Faith is the makeup of who we are as believers. We believe in a God we can't see. We believe in an eternity in heaven that we can't tangibly feel. And so we've been given a measure of faith. In other words, it's become standard definition for us to believe. It's become a standard for us to have faith. But what I believe we're entering a place in as believers is we have to convert from our standard definition of faith to a higher definition of faith. To a faith that doesn't just become a measure, but a faith that with actions makes everything complete. A faith that when put together with works is not dead, but is very much alive. Are you hearing me? A faith that makes things be that were not, as though they were. In Matthew, the disciples were dealing with a situation where they couldn't quite cast this demon out of this little boy, and they were troubled by it. And so Jesus comes and he takes care of it for them. And so the disciples are wondering, Jesus, why couldn't we do this? Why couldn't we cast out this demon? And he simply tells them that it was because of their little faith. See, but what he was telling them wasn't so much of the size of his faith, but he proceeded to tell them that if you did something, if you were to take this faith, this little faith, in fact, the Bible describes it as a mustard seed size faith. If you were to take this mustard seed size faith and do something with it, you could even tell the mountain to get up and get into the sea, to get the mulberry tree to be uprooted. So it's not that their faith was little, it's that it remained little because they refused to do anything with it. It's their faith was not paired with the right action in order to complete what was needed for that demon to be casted out. And so faith without actions is useless. That means, look, if we want to see revival in our nation, if we want to see revival in the city of Newhall, of Santa Clarita, if you want to see a move of God take place in your family, take place in your children, if you want to see things begin to shift, if you want to see the impossible go from a state of being impossible to now very much possible, that means we have to be able to elevate from standard definition faith to a high definition of faith. That means our basic understanding, our basic measure of faith needs to be pushed a little so we can grow. That means we got to get a little uncomfortable and do some things to match with that faith. Go with me in your Bibles to Exodus. I just want to show you, because some of you may not quite agree with me that faith alone is useless, but it's okay. Because there's another man in the Bible who quite didn't understand, and it wasn't of bad intention. It was of good intention. He was definitely with a good heart, but there was another level. There was a higher definition of faith that he was about to experience. Go with me in Exodus chapter 14. And we're going to start in verse 10. So as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. So for just for the sake of the background of this, what's going on, many of you may know this story, but the Israelites are being pursued by the Egyptians because Moses had asked Pharaoh to let his people go, and he finally let them go, and he realized, what was I thinking? What was I doing? Why did I let these people go? And so he gathers the army, all the people, they go, and they begin to pursue the Israelites. And the Israelites are on this journey, and though they could have taken another route, God knew that their faith wasn't quite in high definition. It was still in standard definition. So if they were faced with a war, they probably wouldn't have the faith needed to accomplish and have victory over it. So he decided to put them on a route that was going to show them how to grow in their faith instead of damaging their faith. What a good God. Took them on this journey. They're going there. They're approaching the sea. And here in verse 10, as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified, and they cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. Moses answered the people. He said, do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. That to me sounds like some faith. For Moses to be standing in a situation with no weapons, not an army, but people of Israel, people of God, being approached by chariots and horses and trained soldiers, pursuing them, and he's telling them, do not be afraid. That sounds like faith to me. That sounds like great faith to me. Don't be afraid. You're trapped. You're sandwiched between this mass ocean and an army that's here to kill you and not leave anyone alive. He says that the Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Verse 15, I want you to pay attention to this. Then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Tell my people to do something. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. What I want to make clear is Moses had faith. Would you agree with that? Moses had some faith. And he had faith because he had seen God move prior to this. He experienced great things, great deliverance, great power from God. He had seen it. It had happened. It was real. So he had the faith. He believed. There was just one thing missing. See, what Moses was expecting was for God to deliver them without them lifting a single finger. See, Moses was expecting God to come in and do what he had done before without something taking place. And so God just wanted to remind Moses, listen, Moses, great job, but now I need you to do something. See, I believe that there are plenty of times when we are faced against a situation where we have all the faith that we need to conquer it. We've seen God move. We've tasted and seen his goodness. And so we believe that God is definitely capable of doing something. He's definitely capable of delivering your children from this crazy, controlling drug addiction. He's capable of doing it. You believe that God is able to turn the situation that you may have gotten yourself into around because he loves you. You believe that. You believe that. And Moses believed that God was going to deliver the people. God just said, what now? What are you going to do now? Things may be facing you that are very, very pressing, that are very, very difficult to even acknowledge that are really happening. You don't want to believe that they're happening, but they're happening. And they're telling you, what now? What are you going to do now? You believe, great, awesome. Even the demons believe. Even the demons believe that there is one God. What now? So verse 21, then Moses, he stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued them. Pause right there. Another thing to remember is when you do decide to do something, don't expect the problems to be at a standstill. In fact, the moment you decide to say yes to God, be expecting the pursuit to increase. Be expecting that those very troubles that have pursuing you to raise their definition, raise their standard, to raise in their pressure and to chase you down. Because now you're not just a dormant individual. Now you're causing things to have to change because you decided to move with the faith that you have. Moses decided to take what he had in his hands. He decided to take his measure. He decided to take what was given to him, do something with it, and things began to change. But the pressure was still the same. The Pharaoh was still pursuing him. And so this wasn't the time to look back. This wasn't the time to consider what was happening. It was just to take God's instruction and to move on. To move on. So the Egyptians pursued them, and all the Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. He jammed the wheels of their chariots so that they had difficulty driving, and the Egyptians said, "Let's get away from the Israelites." So they kept going, and now, as they began to press on with resistance, things really began to shift and turn around. So now the Egyptians were saying, "Let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen. What God has started, he will finish." When God commands something to happen, when it's happening, don't expect it to look like the end result and keep going until the end result has come, because he is faithful. And what he promised, he is faithful to complete. And so if he commanded Moses to stretch out his hand to part the sea, and yet the Egyptians were still pursuing, God was still going to take care of them. The job wasn't done quite yet. And so the water flowed back and covered the chariots and horsemen, the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them survived. So what I want you to get from this, I know this was a lot of text, and it was with purpose. And the reason why I wanted to read this to you guys tonight and have us look at this together is because what Moses did completed what his faith started. The action that Moses took by grabbing his staff and by sticking it striking the ground with it, that completed what his faith that was spoken started. See, it was his faith that riled up the courage of the Israelites, but it was his action that got the process going. It's your faith that will stir up the courage inside of you when you feel like quitting, but it's your action that will get you to overcome that challenge. It's what you're going to do that will bring you the victory. It's when you're believing for a breakthrough to take place, when you're believing for a revival to happen, that's what stirs up the courage for you to want to go out and do something. But it's the doing that will bring it to pass. It's the doing that will complete that. It's the doing. So just like the faith of my cell phone carrier was useless without action, our faith, what we believe in, what really puts together our DNA in Christ is useless if nothing is done. Do we understand that? Yes. Do we get that tonight? Yes. See, I have been in personal situations in my life as a child where I completely abandoned faith because there was repetitive issues that I felt like were never disappearing. If it wasn't one, it was another. If it wasn't that one, then it was another. And I felt like my entire childhood was practically robbed from me. And with that, any faith that I had was demolished as well. And I'm not one to wave my flag of pity, to pull out my small violin and play a song of sorrow for you guys to hear. I'm not. But I do firmly believe that the very area that you are challenged in is the very area where you can encourage others to have victory in. That very area. And faith, for me, was the very area that I was challenged in. You see, I now have been married going on 5 years in January. I have a beautiful 3-year-old and a beautiful 6-month-old, 2 girls. We went from me taking the train just to get to a part-time job, and after that part-time job, getting to church to serve, and after church, getting back on that train to get back home just to do it all over again. We went from that to being at a place where we were gifted a vehicle, and then God moved in a way that we can afford another vehicle. I went from a place of believing that I was only meant for a certain level of influence to then being placed at a place of influence that I never thought was possible. My faith was damaged. But here's why. Because as it was being damaged, I refused to go with the resistance that would cause it to grow. And so as a child, I tell you that about my marriage and everything because I came from a home, I came from a place where there was no picture of marriage, where my parents didn't live together, where in fact I lived with one and would sometimes hardly ever see the other. I didn't want to deal with kids because me as a child had to go through the suffering of what it meant to lack, of what it meant to not have. And so how could I dare give that to my kids? How can I dare give that to any kid? So who am I to have that? And so little by little, my childlike faith began to look like no faith at all because of the damage that was occurring. You may have faith today, or you may have had a great measure of faith, and you're hearing me talk and you're thinking, but I've done things to grow my faith. I've done things to supplement what I believe. And yet you still see the damage going. Jesus tells us in John 10:10 that the thief came to steal, came to kill, and came to destroy. He came to steal and kill and destroy. If he stole it, why would he need to kill it? And if he killed it, why would he need to destroy it? Think about that. If the thief came to steal, that means he took possession of. What's the purpose of killing it? Think about that. If he killed it, what's left to destroy? What's left to tear to pieces? See, when my faith was being damaged, that first strike of damage wasn't enough. That second blow of damage wasn't enough. The third disappointment, the fourth disappointment, the continuing disappointments wasn't enough. And the thief had already stole my childlike faith. He already killed my hopes of ever having a marriage, and he destroyed my desire for wanting a family. But then Jesus proceeds by saying, I have come to bring life and life more abundantly. But I have come to bring life. Why? Why? Why abundant life? See, if you would have told me that as I was going through the stealing and the killing, life alone would have been enough for me. But then he promises abundant life. He promises life that outweighs any life you've ever thought to imagine could be real. And so if I've experienced life, but after seeing it being stolen from me and having my hopes killed, I wasn't okay with just life. So then he promises to give you abundance in life. And so our question we have to ask ourselves is, what do we do when we then have our abundant life? What do we do? Go with me in your Bibles to Hebrews chapter 11. Hebrews chapter 11. And we're going to look at verse 30, but as you'll see from the very beginning, this, you're probably saying, okay, HD faith, okay, the faith chapter, yeah, how cute, right? Right? The faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things that are not seen. We know what faith is. But if we're ever going to elevate and do something with a life that's been given to us abundantly, we need to stop going from I know what faith is to I know what to do with my faith. We need to then change our mindset to going, I know what this abundant life looks like. That's great. It smells good. It tastes good. It looks good. But now I know what to do with this abundant life. See, Jesus came to serve, not to be served. Can we agree with that? And so if I'm given an abundant life, who am I to hold on to this abundant life after knowing what it's like to have life taken, to have life killed and life destroyed? Hebrews 11, verse 30. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell after the army had marched around them for 7 days. And so we see here in this chapter of Hebrews, if you go on and read it, and I encourage you tonight to go home and read it, you'll see that this is a list of heroes of faith, right? These are the heroes of great faith. In fact, it's awesome because you'll even see that the one thing that they all had in common was that their faith had works along with it. And along with their works, you begin to see the fruit of their accomplishments. You begin to see, it talks about Noah, it talks about Abraham, it talks about these heroes of faith. But Jericho, the walls of Jericho falling by faith is in reference to Joshua and the faith that Joshua had. Now, I want you guys to go to Joshua, I believe it's chapter 2. Someone could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's chapter 2. And I want you to read this, the fall of the walls of Jericho. Here's why. You see, Joshua was a man who had witnessed the glory of God. He had witnessed the parting of the sea. He had witnessed great things in Israel. He had witnessed great and powerful things, the glory of God. He had, in fact, invaded a land that was promised to them, along with Caleb, that many others didn't want to invade. And so Joshua, you could say, was a man that, along with faith, he was willing to do something. He did something with this life that was given to him. He did something with the faith that he had. And so when Joshua finally came into a position of power, one of the things that God instinctively did with Joshua is that he reminded him, do not be afraid, do not be discouraged. In fact, you'll find that throughout the book of Joshua, you'll see that he's constantly being reminded, do not be afraid and do not be discouraged. So Joshua begins to pursue his position and as leader of this army, and they're doing what they're doing. And so they come to this place of Jericho, and there's walls, and they have been commanded to invade this city. They have been commanded to actually take over this city, and everything that was inside these walls would be handed to them. Everything on the other side of the wall belonged to them. Everything that was on the other side of that wall, remember that. And so they was given a command, he was given a command to walk around for 6 days, and once each day to march around, but don't say a word, but to march around. And on the 7th day, they had to march around these walls 7 times. And on the 7th time, they would give this loud shout. I'm pretty sure, now the text doesn't tell us, the Bible doesn't tell us, but given that these were men like you and I'm pretty sure that on that fourth or fifth day of walking around, knowing the history that these walls cannot be penetrated, that there has not been a time in history where these walls have been invaded, I'm pretty sure that fourth or fifth day began to look like, who are we to command such a thing to happen by marching? See, faith with action will cause you to look a little stupid sometimes. But if you want stupid, crazy results, if you want to see something take place that has never happened before, stop doing what you've always known to do. If you want to see walls being broken down that everyone has tried and failed, stop following the footsteps of doing what they have done and have failed, and create your own. And do something that might make you look a little crazy, because I promise you, you're already crazy before that happened. People already looked at you a little weird. People thought you had some issues going on before you did that, Lexi. So what's one more thing? What's one more thing? So I'm pretty sure that they pondered about what's going on. And after the sixth day, see, they weren't even allowed to say anything. 6 days, a week of walking around. They weren't allowed to say anything. And on the seventh day, they began to walk around 7 times. So they're walking, and they're doing this 7 times. And you may be in here tonight, and you're here to, and you're here, and you're at a place in your life where, you know what, I'm ready to invade. You know, the word that was given to this church at the beginning of the year was, this is the year of invasion. And yeah, there may be just under 4 months left, but that word doesn't change. And so I want to encourage you tonight that if you're here and you still haven't quite invaded, and in fact you're starting to think like, well, the year's almost over anyway, what's the point? On the 7th time of the 7th day, they shouted, and God showed himself faithful, and the walls fell. When you do something and you decide to take your step and invade the promises that God has had for you, God will show himself faithful. And whatever was on the inside of that wall that you need in your life today will belong to you, because the walls will come down. The walls will come down. Joshua was a man who always had to be encouraged, but yet all he did was put action with his faith. All they needed to do was to keep marching. All you need to do, church, is to keep marching. Keep marching. It's okay if you're a little discouraged. It's okay. You see, I understand. You know, in our natural understanding, there's not much we can do with 3 months. There's not much you can do with 3 months, right? In our natural ability. There's not much Joshua could have done to the walls of Jericho, because everyone knew in that land that it was impossible to penetrate. But when you pair up faith with action, what you have started will be completed, and now the impossible becomes possible. And I just want to encourage you, and I'm going to actually start closing in a minute, but I just want to encourage you. Invasion starts with you. Invasion starts with you. Just as Abraham's faith started with him, just as he presented Isaac to the altar, it started with him. Can you imagine how frightened, how afraid, how discouraged he may have felt? He may have felt if he didn't have his faith, but he was doing the work. Joshua leading a group of men around a wall that has never been broken down in a history of that land, has never been broken down before, and by marching was going to break it down. Invasion starts with you, and it will end with you. And as you take your measure of faith that has been given to you, it doesn't matter. You can be 70, 80, 90 years old. You can be 10, 12, 13 years old. Your measure has been given to you intentionally. And all God is asking you to do is to move on, to keep marching, to do something with this measure. Don't let the measure of faith that was given to you be at a place that's so little that when the thief comes to steal, you have no strength to take it back. That when the thief tries to kill, you have no hope that it'll ever be revived. And so while you have your measure of faith, all you have to do is do something with it. Keep fighting for what you're believing for. Keep fighting for what you have faith for. Keep fighting. Don't quit on the thing that God has said is finished.
If today's message impacted you in any way and you would like to help us spread the gospel to others by giving a financial gift, please text the number below, and we know that someone's life will be changed as yours was today.